Hi, I'm Holly Stokes, the brain trainer. I help yo-yo dieters achieve lasting weight loss success by addressing the real reasons they gain weight, which are cravings, lack of motivation, even self-sabotage. Welcome to the class, Light a Lighter You, Train Your Brain to Slim Your Body. So how our brain works, there's neurons that are nerve cells that link together, and these links between the nerve cells then create pathways. So when we're learning something new or when we're thinking a new thought, these neurons link up and create a chain or a pathway in our brain. Then the more that we repeat that pathway, the brain automates that pathway into a default behavior. So this is really good for us in a lot of ways. We don't have to relearn how to tie our shoes, or we don't have to relearn how to drive a car. These things come automatically. And then of course there's ways that these habits can actually get in our way. So old habits like the need to clean our plate, if we grew up with that as a response, of course it was our parents. So if we grew up with that as a response or a habit, then it overrides that internal signal of I'm full, and we don't recognize being full or finishing dinner until we finish the plate. So that's a simple level habit, is how our brain wires in these habits. And then we get into things that are a little more complicated. So cravings are actually a little more complicated. Cravings aren't logical and rational. Cravings actually come from the unconscious mind, and that's why they're so difficult to change. So the thing with cravings is that we all have history and meanings attached to foods. So think of pumpkin pie. What comes to mind when you think of pumpkin pie? Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. Thanksgiving. Holidays. Holidays. What feelings are associated with that?
Family.
Family.
Comfort.
Comfort. Okay, so connection, family. So because of our past history, we all have these meanings and associations attached to foods. So now think of some of the foods that you crave. And let's hear some of the foods that you might crave.
Chips.
Dorito chips.
Pasta.
Pasta.
Ice cream.
Chocolate. Okay. And now think of the history associated with those foods. So you might, as you start to identify some of this history, you might start to recognize that the environments we experience these foods have created some of these associations and meanings connected. So for instance, one of the associations that I had growing up was any time that we went on a road trip, my mom would stop at the gas station and each of the kids in the car could get a candy bar. So that created a habit. When I'm at the gas station, I get to stop and get a candy bar. Of course, this didn't work out so well when I became independent, and having a need for a candy bar every time I stopped to fill up gas, of course, didn't work out so well. So until I changed that mental habit or that association, that impulse for candy or something was there. So if you recognize some of the foods that you crave, what are the connections that you might have noticed with those foods? Recognize reward, family. So for instance, a hot fudge sundae, it's not just frozen sweet milk and chocolate goo. It really represents every time we sat down with mom or dad over a hot fudge sundae and all of the feelings and connections, associations that we have with that. So what happens is our unconscious mind, think of it as a highly compact supercomputer, able to process large amounts of information very quickly. Well, our unconscious mind holds all our past history. And what happens when we experience something every day, our unconscious mind sums up the positive and the negatives, and we get a feeling about it. This is also how our motivation works. So I was teaching a healthy lifestyle class, and it was week 4 of the healthy lifestyle class. My ladies are wandering in, taking their seats, and I started the class off with a question. Well, what are you guys doing for exercise now? All I got was blank stares. No one was making eye contact, everyone was avoiding, so I said, okay, it's week 4, you're supposed to be adding in some exercise. And one of the ladies, she blurted out, if we liked to exercise, we wouldn't be here. So that tuned my attention to what are they thinking and feeling in connection with exercise. So I asked that question, what are you guys thinking and feeling? Sweaty, hard work, difficult, yuck. And there were even past experiences of, forced PE marches, having to wear little shorts and parade out in front of the guys at that uncomfortable teenage age. Well, all of our past history associated goes into these memory files. And then when we encounter it, we sum it up and we get the feeling about it. So from my class, I noticed that we needed to change what we're thinking and feeling in relation to exercise so that we can feel motivated and feel excited about it. So motivation, a lot of times we'll think, oh, I just need to be more disciplined. Oh, I just need to be more motivated. But motivation is actually a sum total of our past history, and that's how it's also connected. At even the unconscious level, our motivation comes from that history. So part of how we can start to address that is by changing the mental habits and patterns that we have in these past associations. Well, kind of one easy way to do this is by changing how our brain codes information. So think of a food that you crave out in front of you. So typically people have a more compelling response with things like chips. So imagine seeing a bowl of your favorite chips out in front of you, and it can be any kind. And now notice how you represent that in your mind. So is it within reaching distance? Right out in front of you. Notice, is it in color? Notice, is it three-dimensional? So now imagine, looking at the bowl of chips, so if it were in front of you, how compelled would you be to eat it? Scale of 1 to 10, just come up with a feeling, and 10 being high, that you wouldn't pass it up.
8.
8,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 8.
Okay. And now imagine taking one of the chips and biting one of the chips, and as you do, you start to notice the taste, the flavor, but then there's something a little off. It's gritty, it's like there's sand in the chips. Spit it out. Now look at the bowl of chips now, scale of 1 to 10, how compelling would they be?
0.
Okay. And now noticing that picture, that image in front of you, now imagine draining all of the color out until it's black and white. And notice, how does that change how compelling that would be? And now imagine putting a frame around it so it's a flat image, and now just sending it out away from you. And notice, does that also take the edge off of it?
Mm-hmm.
So just by changing, so this is one of the ways that we can adjust how our brain represents foods, or how foods, or that relationship that we have with different foods, is by changing how our brain pictures or images the foods. So this is actually an exercise from NLP. NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which means the neurons of our brain, neuro, and our language patterns, how we talk about things, and our programming is our whole past history and those associations and meanings. They're all interconnected, and we can access how the brain stores these past images and pictures, and we can actually help the brain make updates and changes. And now we can actually do that very quickly. So we'll go into a little more about NLP in a moment. So the other key piece that really kind of keeps people from following through with the program is self-sabotage. So if you've ever said something like, I'm not going to eat sugar anymore, and then notice it's almost like the devil on one shoulder, the angel on the other, and then you're kind of battling between these two parts of yourself.
You want sugar more than ever.
Right. And it's like on your radar. You notice it everywhere, right? So part of what's going on can relate to some of the deeper programs of our unconscious mind. Most of us actually know what is healthy. We know fruits and vegetables, lean meats, proteins. We know what's healthy. The challenge is that the things that we crave are typically the reward foods, comfort foods, things with these past associations. Or we just find ourselves drawn to, the unhealthy foods, not feeling motivated, and we have different meanings attached. Well, one of the underlying patterns that can relate to self-sabotage are ideas, or we call them programs, of the unconscious mind that we've picked up over time. So a good example of this comes from one client. He had been pretty much overweight most of his life, had a really difficult time staying on track with the program, would be motivated for a little while, then fall off the wagon. And what he identified working with the tools of NLP was that when he was 9, he was bullied by a group of older kids. What went off in his mind was, if only I were bigger, they couldn't pick on me. So what happened is his unconscious mind started to run a program to be bigger so that he could stand up for himself. He couldn't grow taller, so he grew wider. The problem with this, of course, is that the unconscious mind didn't get the updates. It didn't get the update that he turned 10, 15, 20, 30, and that he didn't have to be bigger to stand up for himself. So sometimes we're dealing with some of this old past history that is almost like invested in being a bigger weight than we need to be, or being larger than we need to be. And if you have a conscious goal, I know I'm going to lose 20 pounds this time. And then if you have an unconscious agenda, which part do you think is going to win? Unconscious, because it's working all the time and automatically. So we can put a lot of conscious energy into that goal, but it can be exhausting, almost trying to override what's going on at the unconscious level. So some of the unconscious programs or beliefs that my clients have found have been things like, if I am overweight, then I won't be attractive, and so I don't have to get hurt through a relationship. So that was one program somebody noticed or identified. There was another one, and these things are interesting. They don't necessarily make sense at the conscious level, but it makes sense to the younger self that picked up the idea. So one of the beliefs was, if I am overweight, there's more of me to love. I'm more lovable. So
I was just going to say, I think I also have I'm more approachable. I think that was one thing personally that I noticed. That I thought, oh, well, if I'm a little, somehow I'm more approachable. And
yeah. Yeah, and one of my clients picked this up in her teenage years. She was a very beautiful woman, and her underlying program was, if I'm overweight, I'm being nicer to other women, because I'm doling down my appearance, so allowing them to shine more. So it was a way of fitting in to a social group. So the really fascinating thing is that sometimes we can have these underlying patterns that are kind of working against us. So it used to be that the only way to adjust or change these unconscious programs was through hypnosis, where people would go into a deeply relaxed state, and then we would, the hypnotherapist reads a script which tells the person's mind how to think differently or be differently. And the difficulty with hypnosis, well, there's a couple. So one is that most of what we think of when we think of hypnosis is what we see on stage. Someone eating an onion thinking it's an apple or quacking like a duck. The difficulty with stage hypnosis is they use confusational patterns to confuse the mind so that the person's mind relaxes and becomes open to suggestion from the hypnotist. So with that form of hypnosis, not everybody can be hypnotized that way, because not everybody responds by being confused. So if you've seen, have you guys seen stage hypnosis? So they call up a bunch of people, and then they go through a bunch of really quick patterns, and then they send about half of the people back to their seats, right? And then the rest of what they see is entertainment. Well, the other difficulty with stage hypnosis is that it has a very short-term effect. So when people go back to their regular life, they can still tell the difference between an apple and an onion. They are no longer quacking like a duck, which is good, right?
although less entertaining.
Exactly. So one of the hypnotherapy is a little different from stage hypnosis in that rather than confusing the mind, we actually use relaxation and focus techniques, which then allows the mind to incorporate the positive messages. So the way that hypnotherapy is effective is by repetition. So if you would work with a hypnotherapist, there would usually be a number of sessions, and those sessions would feed your mind positive messages, which would then help your unconscious mind make the updates and changes. So one of the tools of my program for people to work with is a 6-part CD series. I found in working with my clients, I was repeating myself quite a bit. And so rather than continue to repeat myself and do the same session, of course, because I get kind of bored.
No.
So it was a little self-serving. Like, I'm bored of this. Let's just record it,
Right.
create a CD, and then my clients can take it home as homework, and then they get the benefit of repeating in their mind the positive messages. So if you want to take positive action, you need to feed your mind the positive messages. Chances are, over time, we've actually been feeding ourselves some of the negative messages, and we've been allowing some of those negative programs to run for us. So I'll just show my CD set really quick.